I should have said when I started that the reason I'm able to share those things is because the Ethical Society. I wouldn't have shared that anywhere else. Our guest speaker today, I'm very, very happy to introduce, is Sharon Stanley, which is a longtime member of the Ethical Humanist Society of Long Island and the American Ethical Union. Sharon is a member of the Nassau County Public Education for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Moms Demand Action, as probably most of you know, is a grassroots movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence. The group works to pass stronger gun laws and to close the loopholes that jeopardize the safety of our families and of our children. They work all over the country in communities with business leaders to encourage a culture of responsible gun ownership. They know that gun violence is preventable and are committed to doing what it takes to keep families safe. And most of you know that we've had a pretty strong Moms Demand Action group in St. Charles with one particular person who had to leave the community, unfortunately. So, but it is something we've been involved in. I've been involved in personally. I know a lot of you have as well. So please join me in welcoming Sharon and her associates.
Well, I want to give a big thank you to the Ethical Society of Mid Rivers for inviting our public education team to present this vital program. In addition to myself, today's team consists of Janet, Margaret, Terry, and Gabriel. I'm going off script now because I had no idea that David Bowie wrote that song back in 2008. And in 2018, that's when Parkland happened. That was also Valentine's Day. So I don't know what to do with that information, but I just thought I'd share it. Okay. We'd like to acknowledge the St. Louis school shooting on October 24th with sadness. The health teacher and a teenage student were killed and 6 others were injured. The shooter, who was 19 years old, had been flagged by the FBI, but was still able to legally purchase a gun. Missouri doesn't have red flag laws, which would have allowed the local police to remove the gun from his home, although his parents had contacted them because of his unstable mental state. The Center for Disease Control has determined that gun violence is a national health crisis, and it's the #1 killer of children, surpassing cancer and car accidents. It is a problem specific to America, and this presentation will show us how we can all play our part. Please be advised that our presentation includes vivid statistics about gun violence and suicide. Additionally, we'd like to inform people that although school violence, mass shootings get most of the headlines, it's only a small percentage of gun violence in every area of our country. Statistically, children remain safer in school than in any other place, including home. There will be a question and answer period at the end of our program, so please hold all your questions until then. We also have some helpful literature and links available for you. Here's Margaret.
Between August 1st, 2021 and May 31, 2022, there have been 193 incidents of gun violence at schools across the country. In 2022, there were at least 140 incidents of gunfire on school grounds, resulting in 46 deaths and 111 injuries nationally. That's 4 times higher than the average. But we know how to stop this violence. We know how to keep children safe. We don't have to live like this. Secure gun storage is a simple solution to this crisis that would have a substantial impact. It's not a partisan issue, and everyone should be behind it. That's why we're working to promote and normalize secure gun storage through programs like Be Smart. Research has shown it to be one of the most effective ways to prevent school shootings and protect children. Here's Terry.
On December 15th, 2012, the day after the Sandy Hook school shooting tragedy, Shannon Watts started a Facebook group with a message that all Americans can and should be It should do more to reduce gun violence. This online conversation turned into the nation's largest grassroots volunteer network working to end gun violence. Moms Demand Action campaigns for new and stronger solutions to lax gun laws and loopholes that jeopardize the safety of our families. Here's Janet.
And so from that, the public education team and the Be Smart program was created. This Be Smart campaign was launched across all 50 states to raise awareness that secure gun storage can save children's lives. It helps teach the basics of safe storage of firearms in a home. Just as important, however, it helps to begin a dialogue for those times that a child may be a guest in someone else's home. It is necessary to keep our children, grandchildren, and young adults safe, especially when they're out of our close supervision and socializing with others. This Be Smart framework is designed to help parents and adults normalize conversation about gun safety and take responsible actions that can prevent senseless child gun deaths and injuries. We'd like to share the most basic ideas using the acronym Be Smart. Terry?
S, secure all guns in your home and vehicles. M, model responsible behavior around guns. A, ask about the presence of unsecured guns in other homes. R, recognize the risks of suicide. T, tell your friends to be smart.
Every day in America, more than 110 people are killed with guns. 110 a day. Sadly, the USA's gun violence homicide rates exceed not only all first world countries, but most third world countries as well. More guns equals more gun violence. Here's Margaret.
We all want our kids to grow up happy and healthy. We each have the right to make responsible decisions about how to protect our homes, families, and communities, including whether or not to have a gun in our home. If we can prevent even one child gun death or injury, it's our responsibility to do so. Janet?
S, secure all guns in your home and vehicles. Statistics show that 13 million households with children contain at least one gun. Studies have found that most children in these gun-owning households knew where the gun was stored, whether or not it was secured. This is why it is vital to store guns locked and unloaded with the ammunition stored separately. Hiding a gun is very different than securing a gun. Sharon?
In 2019, New York State enacted a safe gun storage law, which requires everybody to lock all guns in an appropriate safe storage depository that is incapable of being unlocked without a key or combination lock, or people are supposed to use a trigger lock. Therefore, if a child finds an unsecured weapon, it is certainly a tragedy, but it's a preventable tragedy and no longer considered an accident. Unsecured guns also contribute to the staggering number of guns stolen each year. Many of these guns are sold to individuals who would not be able to purchase a firearm through legal means. I personally believe that 80 to 90% of gun violence would be reduced if all the states concentrated on getting safe storage legislation passed. This is an important yet doable goal, in my opinion. Here's Scott, a gun owner, a well-known and respected gun safety advocate, to explain and demonstrate more about safe storage.
As a gun owner, safe and secure storage of a firearm is one of the most important responsibilities. It's an everyday, full-time responsibility. As a gun owner, you must always secure your firearm and ammunition separately so they are not accessible to children or any other unauthorized person. Whenever a firearm is not in use, it must be kept unloaded and locked up. Your safety and the safety of others requires that you always secure and store your firearm in a manner that will prevent unauthorized access. We know that incidents of gunfire on school grounds, the majority of shooters under the age of 18 obtain the gun or guns from their home or the homes of relatives or friends. Research also finds that secure storage is associated with the decreased risk of suicide and unintentional firearm injury among children. Now, do not underestimate the curiosity of a child. As stated in an earlier slide, children who live in a home with firearms know where they're stored. So what do I mean about securing your guns? Guns should be stored locked and unloaded with the ammunition stored separately. Hiding a gun is not safe storage. There are some commonly used secure storage practices that I'd like to show you. New York requires a gun lock to be included with every gun sale, and most often it's a cable lock like these. Now, a cable lock is fed through the magazine of the firearm, out the chamber, and back into the lock. Now, some firearms do not have a magazine well, so this cable can be passed through the barrel or the cylinder. And both of these methods prevent the firearm from being loaded or fired. Now this one here, this is a trigger lock, and like the name suggests, a trigger lock is a mechanism that fits over the gun's trigger guard to prevent the firearm from being fired. Now since the trigger lock comes in direct contact with the trigger, it's not designed to be used on a loaded gun. And like I said earlier, a firearm should never be stored loaded, but it is possible with this type of lock. Now, both types of locks here prevent the firearm from being used, but it does not prevent theft. In the United States, an estimated 380,000 firearms are stolen from private gun owners every year. And a large number of those guns are stolen from cars. Often, when a person with a carry permit goes to an establishment that does not allow that firearm, they'll put that firearm in the glove box or under the seat or even in the trunk of the car. Now, this gun box here is very inexpensive. It's about $29, and it comes with a cable. Now, this cable you could take and you could put it around the frame of the seat or any other permanent structure in the car. This cable gets inserted into this slot. Put your firearm in, lock it, and for $29 you don't have to worry about anyone carrying off your firearm if they break in to the car. Now, many people own firearms for home protection, which is their right, and they'll say they need quick access to the firearm in the event of a break-in or some other emergency. Needing quick access does not justify storing your firearm under a pillow, in a nightstand drawer, in a shoebox under the bed, or high on a shelf in a closet. Now, this safe here is a digital safe, and as you can see, you could access it rather quickly. I think this is quicker than trying to open up maybe one of the trigger locks or a cable lock. So there's no excuse for saying that you need quick access. So then they might say, well, I don't want to fumble around with keys. I don't want to fumble around with a combination in the emergency in the dark. So for those people, they can get a biometric safe. Now this safe here, it doesn't come cheap. It's somewhere about $200, $250. But I believe that is the responsibility of the gun owner to make sure that their firearm is secured safely. And if you want quick access and you don't want to mess with keys or anything like that, then it's your obligation to purchase a safe like this. This safe here, I just got to rub my finger on it. It pops open. I get my firearm. Now, they also make safes large enough to store long guns, which you can also store your handguns in, and often they're fireproof, so you can keep all your important documents in there also. So the burden is on the gun owner to secure that firearm.
M, model responsible behavior. It is always an adult's responsibility to prevent unauthorized access to guns, not a curious child's responsibility to avoid guns. Make it a part of the normal conversation you have with your children. Keep the language simple. For example, if you see a gun, don't touch it. Tell an adult right away. Here's Scott again.
Modeling responsible behavior starts with safe storage, but it doesn't end there. Responsible behavior means a lot of things, such as knowing your firearm. A gun owner should know how to use the safety on their firearm, and they should also take some safety classes and use that firearm at a range. There are 5 basic firearm safety rules. 1, always keep your firearm pointed in a safe direction. 2, treat all firearms as if they are loaded. 3, keep your trigger finger outside the guard and off the trigger until you're ready to fire. 4, be certain of your target, your line of fire, and what lies beyond the target. And 5, always wear appropriate eye and ear protection. Now, we all know that children watch everything we do and like to copy us. That's why you may watch your tongue, or to be sure to say thank you and please in front of them. As a gun owner, it's your responsibility to teach your child that firearms are for adults only. And if they see a firearm, do not touch it and get an adult immediately. Also, teach them that these same rules apply when they're at a friend's house or any other place. It's our job as gun owners to model responsible behavior.
A. A is for ask. Ask about unsecured guns in other homes. Make it a part of the safety conversation you have when sending your child to a new place. Try email or text. 4.6 million US children live in a household with at least one loaded and unlocked gun. This is something I never thought to do, to ask if there were guns in other houses. My child is 24 years old now, but this is something I never would have thought of. And what are the right words to use? We've decided to provide a few role play situations to help make us all feel comfortable asking this vital question. Here's Margaret.
Owning a gun is a personal decision, but secure safety is a public safety issue. I'm sorry, but secure storage is a public safety issue. Kids and unsecured guns are a potentially lethal combination. Fortunately, a simple conversation can help keep children out of harm's way. It doesn't need to feel strange or awkward to bring up the issue of how guns are stored. These simple conversations with your friends, caregivers, and relatives before a child or grandchild visits can help save lives. Here's Janet.
So this is my ask. When my daughters were old enough to have play dates, I began with 3 simple questions. I asked if there were firearms in the home. I asked if they were locked up. And I asked if the ammunition was stored separately. It was incredibly uncomfortable and incredibly awkward. So what I found made it easier was I started to sandwich it in between the typical questions that you ask at a play date. Are there pets in the house? Are there any food allergies? It made it a little bit simpler, but it was still a very difficult thing to do. I asked it every time my children went on a play date, and I made sure my daughters were in the room while I was on the phone asking the parents this. I just wanted them to understand the importance and the value of it so that if conversations came up in other people's homes, they already knew the correct verbiage to use. As they got older and got to middle school, it became more of a source of embarrassment for me to ask those questions, or maybe I was just the source of embarrassment. Not sure which one it was, but I continued to ask those questions and I continued to make them sit there and listen. Once I got to high school, however, I decided that I would let them ask those questions. But I knew, since it was my responsibility as the parent, I knew that I was going to follow up with those parents and make sure my children asked. I never had to do that because I always had parents reach out to me to say, I can't believe your child asked us about this, or your teenager asked about this. They asked about guns. How do you get them to ask these kinds of questions? And I told those parents it was basic routine and it was modeling appropriately how to ask those kinds of questions. So that was my ask. Terry?
Sometimes these conversations are easier via text or email. Try sandwiching your questions amongst other questions and information. For example, hi, my daughter is excited to come to your house. She doesn't have any pet or food allergies, so you don't need to be concerned about that. Also, do you have any guns in the house? And are they locked securely? I just want the kids to be safe and enjoy their playtime. Here's a role play situation with the mother-child scenario.
Excited I'm so excited for your first babysitting job. When you speak to Joey's mom, you need to ask a few questions. Ask if they have any pets. Ask if they have emergency numbers on the counter. Also ask if they have any firearms in the house.
Ask what? That's embarrassing. I can't ask about guns.
Oh, sure you can. It's an important but uncomfortable question. All you have to say is, for the safety of everyone, right? I was wondering if you had any firearms in your home. Are they locked away? Is the ammunition separate? Right? Now you try it. Let's see.
Okay. For the safety of everyone, I was wondering if you had any firearms in your home. Are they locked away? Is the ammunition separate? Hey, that wasn't so bad. I'm gonna write it down and practice it a little before I call Joe's mom.
Great job, Malik. I'm so proud of you.
It is always,
Excited.
it is always an adult's responsibility to be smart, not a child's. Even though Shanae is teaching her son Malik to ask about guns in other homes, it is Shanae's responsibility to monitor and ensure those questions get asked properly. Just as Janet previously described when having her daughters ask about guns in other homes. Here's Kay and Shanae demonstrating a situation when a child is staying with their grandparents.
It's your neighbor Kathy. How are you and your family?
Hi, Kathy. We are all well, and thanks. How have you and Jack been?
We're good, thanks. We're all good here. I have a question for you. You know, our grandson Carlo is spending a few days with us. Do you remember Carlo coming? I think the boys played together in the park. He wants to know if you or James could come over to our house this afternoon. He has a new basketball he'd like to show him. Maybe they could play a little.
Well, sure. I know they had a good time playing at the park together the last time Carlo was visiting you. But I have to ask you something important. Do you or your husband have any guns at your house?
Oh, well, we do have a gun because Jack is a retired police officer. But don't worry, Carlo doesn't even know where it is. And we always told him that if he should see a gun, he's not to touch it without his grandpa supervising. I know he wouldn't. He's really a good kid.
But I've heard of many cases where kids, even good kids, do know where the gun is or can easily find it. Then they may play with it or show it off to a friend, even if they know they shouldn't. And then in a split second, a tragedy can happen just like that.
Oh my God, that's awful.
I know. And that's why New York recently passed a safe storage law. Guns have to be locked, unloaded, separately from the ammunition. And that's to keep kids and teens safe.
You know, I'll talk to Jack when he comes home. I think he'll agree. He's always been a responsible gun owner.
Good. And I'll be eager to hear how it goes. And I'll be happy to talk to him if you like. But for today, let's meet at the park. Carlo can bring his new basketball. And afterwards, they can come over to my house for ice cream. We don't have any guns in our home, but we do have a cat. Carlo isn't allergic to cats, is he?
Oh, no, we have a cat also. But thanks for asking.
When I first joined Mom's Demand, I found this statistic to be the most frightening statistic of all. 2/3 of gun violence is suicide, mostly because someone who is at the lowest time of their lives found an unsecured weapon. R, recognize the role of guns in suicide. 85% of suicide attempts with a gun result in death, a much higher fatality rate than any other means of self-harm. This contributes to the fact that 40% of child suicides involve a gun. Half of those who survive a suicide attempt report spending 10 minutes or less deliberating before the actual attempt. Here's Dr. Eve Kriev, a local pediatrician, with further insight.
My name is Dr. Eve Kriev, and I'm a pediatrician, and I'm Legislative Advocacy Chair of New York's Chapter 2, American Academy of Pediatrics, that represents 1,500 pediatricians across Long Island, Queens, and Brooklyn. As a pediatrician, I see a lot of children that come in with depression or even suicidal ideation, particularly this year with the social isolation that the pandemic has brought. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the R in SMART, which stands for recognize the role of guns in suicide. Does it matter how a person tries to commit suicide? Absolutely. Suicide attempts with a gun are very likely to be deadly, whereas suicide attempts with other means have a much greater chance of survival. You can see here all the different ways that people might attempt suicide, and by far, firearm attempts are much more likely to be fatal. And this slide tells you just how impulsive a decision it is when people make the decision to commit suicide, with 24% of the time making that decision within 5 minutes. And with the case of teens attempting suicide with guns, that's a very tragic decision, because teens, as we know, are very likely to be impulsive and make impulsive decisions and think about killing themselves. And if a gun happens to be accessible to them, it'll be a very tragic choice. An average of 4 American teenagers commit suicide every single day. Most young survivors of a serious suicide attempt do not commit suicide later. And most survivors of suicide attempts were glad that they were saved. So that's the most tragic thing to me of all, just because we know that people who have survived suicide attempts, they regret it almost immediately. Whereas, children and teens who commit suicide with a gun, they're not going to be able to survive most likely, and it's just tragic. 17% of high school students seriously considered attempting suicide within the last year. 17%. Every year, more than 600 children, 17 and under, die by suicide with a gun. 600 children a year. Does a gun in the home increase the chance of suicide? Yes. In states where there are more guns, more people commit suicide. Studies have shown that the risk of suicide is 4 to 10 times higher in homes with guns than in homes without guns. And if the handgun happens to be stored loaded or unlocked, the risk of suicide is even greater. The risk of dying by suicide is 4 to 10 times higher in homes with guns. So if your teen or child is at risk for suicide, please remove guns and ammunition from your home. The American Academy of Pediatrics advises that the safest home for a child is one without guns. The most effective way to prevent unintentional gun injuries and suicide to children and adolescents is the absence of guns from homes in the communities. If you must have a gun in the home, keep it unloaded and locked up with a trigger lock, and store those bullets in a different place than the gun is locked away. Don't let teens have a key to those places where the guns and bullets are stored. And if a teen becomes depressed or is at risk for suicide or is having mood swings even, please just store that gun outside the home. These are some signs that you might want to look for in your children and teens that might be experiencing depression. If their mood changes, they seem irritable, they're having feelings of hopelessness, rage, they're getting into conflicts with the family, fighting a lot. If they seem to be having behavior changes, they're stepping away from their regular personal relationships, not wanting to text or video chat with their friends. If they seem to lose interest in activities that they normally enjoy, their hobbies, their sports, their music, that's a red flag as well. If they have sleep difficulties or if they're sleeping more than usual, that's another big sign that we see. If they have no appetite, if they're having trouble concentrating, or if their grades are falling at school, if they seem not to be caring about how they look and not really paying attention to their personal hygiene, you want to think about depression. If they seem to be partaking in really risky behavior with their friends, another red flag there. Or obviously if they're expressing thoughts about death or suicide, that's something to be alert to. Here's some resources that you should take down if you have concerns that someone you know might be feeling suicidal.
T, tell your peers to be smart. Your voice and all voices are critical. Research shows that law enforcement, the military, and hunting or outdoor groups are particularly effective at communicating safe storage practices. Someone hears the Be Smart message every 21 minutes. Sharon?
When I first joined Mom's Demand, I needed to learn the acronym for SMART. And I happened to have this card in my pocket on my way to the city with my friend. We were reading the card and practicing, and she was really interested. What does A stand for again? She asked me. What does T mean? We had fun, but I really learned the information at the time. The next day, my friend couldn't wait to call me. She ran into a friend of her daughter's, a young mother, and she proceeded to share the Be Smart information with her. I felt so proud that my tell actually resulted in 2 tells. Here's Janet.
So this is my tell. I was an elementary school teacher for 33 years. We began having active shooter drills just after the Sandy Hook murders. When we heard the code words over the loudspeaker, everybody knew, children and adults in this building, that we needed to find a secure corner in our classrooms away from windows and away from doors. We always struggled as teachers because we had a kindergarten through 6th grade school. We always struggled with how to tell the children about a dangerous person in our building. Obviously, you have to handle it differently with a kindergartner than you would with a 6th grader. But the students knew that as soon as they heard that, they went into the corner. I watched their faces. I think it disturbed them terribly when they saw me walking towards the door to make sure the door was locked, because that was my job. Their job was to get into the corner. My job was to make sure the door was locked. And I could see it was fearful for them. For me, looking at these 23 little 3rd grade faces stuffed into a corner of a room was just terrifying to me. But I knew that I needed to do what I could to keep them safe. There was always a combination of fear, concern, and seriousness on their faces. I never had to speak to them about being quiet. They were just quiet. I think the most traumatic moments for them during those drills was when they heard the principal or the assistant principal jiggling the doorknob to make sure that the door was locked. They didn't know if it was a drill or not, and just that sound was terrifying to them. These drills always occurred before Meet the Teacher or back to school night. So I always used that opportunity to speak to the parents about this experience that their children were having. I taught in a district where there were a lot of police officers and firemen, so I knew that there were firearms in homes. So I took that opportunity after I shared this experience to talk to them about safe storage. I took that opportunity to tell parents. Terry?
According to the FBI, the months during the pandemic have been the highest months on record for firearm sales. During the pandemic, fear induced people to go out and purchase firearms. As life returns to normal, we need to do everything we can to make sure that these new gun owners are aware of safe storage and their responsibility to be smart for kids. If our message prevents even one child's death, it will be worth it. Here's Margaret.
S, secure guns in homes and vehicles. M, model responsible behavior around guns. A, ask about the presence of unsecured guns in other homes. R, recognize the risks of teen suicide. T, tell your peers to be smart. Sharon?
A great source of statistics about gun violence in any given state is www.everystat.org. This is where I got these statistics specific to Missouri. There are 2 slides, 17 and 18, but I've sent this information as a PDF to Jill if anybody wants a paper copy of this. So we will stop right now and leave this slide up, which has the important phone numbers, which are nationally phone numbers we can use, including the new 988 phone number as the suicide hotline. I'd like to give a special thanks to our hosts today, the Ethical Society of Mid-Rivers. Thank you to all who attended our presentation, and please help us spread the word to be smart. We will now open it up to any questions.
Here, I'll say something. You know, a couple of years ago, like in the town next over, we had a kid. I guess he must have, you know, found his parents' unsecured gun. He accidentally shot and killed himself. So, yeah, this is just a very important message, you know. And you know, I checked the news. Seems like definitely no more than every couple of months, I'm hearing about a local incident where people are accidentally, you know, shooting themselves or whatever. So, you know, it's a really big issue. And as it seems that it seems like it's getting all that much easier, you know, for people to get guns. It's just a real big worry, especially with kids.
And you know, it's to the participant that just spoke, what you are seeing in Missouri is being seen in other states as well. It's not just found in Missouri. So it's a daily occurrence all over our country.
Yeah.
As a grandparent, how could I approach my grandchildren's local school to talk about this, or should I ask to see what programming or instructions they have in place and how they provide that to students, or should I talk to the school board, or what should I do?
So Sharon, you want me to take that one?
Yes.
Okay. So I started not for New York State. We're a small area of New York State. We're Long Island, and I started a school district initiative where I created a letter that parents and grandparents can send to their school districts regarding this kind of a program, regarding this kind of information to be disseminated to the school district. We presented this program because of that initiative. We presented this program to boards of education. We presented it to parents within a school district through their parent-teacher organization. We've presented to faculty and staff and mental health advisors within school districts. I'm sure I can get I think Sharon might even have the template. I'm more than happy to send the template to you and fill it in as you wish. I know that if there's a Moms Demand Action, which I know that there is in Missouri, I'd be more than happy to share the template with the public education team for the Be Smart program as well, so that you can get that information out to as many families as you can, because to us, getting that message out about safe storage and getting that message out about having those normalized conversations is what we can do as adults to help keep our children safe.
Thank you.
You know, one of the things you could expand on and help a little bit with, I'm a grandfather now with a 5-year-old granddaughter, and I don't have any issues asking about the guns. I don't have any issues talking to the other parent. I don't have any issue that my issue comes in then how to tell my granddaughter she can't go to that house. And anything that, you know, and of course I have the best granddaughter in the world, so I want to do everything I can for her. But that's a hard fact. I don't have that conversation sometimes at homes because I know the answer and I don't want to have to tell my granddaughter no.
Yeah, that is very uncomfortable and very difficult. And from my own personal experience, I'll let you know that it did prevent my daughters from going to certain homes. And that was the week that they hated me for that reason, or were angry at me for that reason. I felt personally as a parent, and I'm not a grandparent yet, I felt that keeping my children safe was more important than their being angry at me for that particular reason. So what I did in return was, instead of letting my child go to that house, I invited the child over to our house. But I did have that conversation with my children.
I do want to say, as a parent who I'm not so much with the bravery of being able to ask those questions. So just seeing that modeled in the presentation was super helpful for my brain. I wanted to say thank you for that. And then just that for like, the way that I've handled this so far is just to like never leave my children alone, which is not, you know, developmentally like great for them. So I think that there was so much in this presentation that was helpful, and that specifically was great for my brain. So thank you.
Sharon, could you give them a little bit of a background about Shanae, the star of our videos?
Yes, I will. And I was also going to ask if you think we should get out of full, if we can go, get out of the screen. Yes, exactly. And, so everybody can see us better and we can chat better maybe. And Gabe, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Shanae is one of our survivors. And by that, we mean she joined our group originally because her son was killed. He was at a graduation party. He was just about to graduate and go to a wonderful university called St. John's University. And he's at a graduation party and someone pulls out a gun and they were shooting and then he was dead, just like that. He was an honor student. He wasn't in any gangs. The tragedy of this is that even though Shanae has moved to a different location, this kind of thing runs in families, I guess, like other bad things that happen to us, like addiction or drug abuse, or I don't know, but it's just so odd because she has had 3 cousins killed and shot, and it's almost like it's a reoccurring problem, unfortunately, perhaps because of the neighborhood she's forced to live in, because these are the places she either needs to live in to afford or needs to live in to get to work easily.
She's lost a fiance as well. And this Thursday, we're going to a funeral of a niece that she lost as well. And I think that there are some communities that have a higher rate of gun violence. And those are under our umbrella of Moms Demand Action. Public education is very, very important to us, what we do right now. But another thing that we do is support our survivors in the Survivor Network and help them help their communities rise out of the levels of violence that are occurring there. So we do other events that kind of help them as well and support them as well.
I kind of see a sort of a feedback loop in the Second Amendment crowd. They insist they need guns to fight off a tyrannical government, and at the same time they're voting for politicians who are putting in the very type of authoritarian policies that would make that necessary. How has this program been received among that crowd, and do you have any advice for inroads if you're dealing with someone like that?
Well, yes, we actually have a program coming up a couple of months away that we are involving a member of the NRA and a gun owner, because we feel that that's the audience that we do need to reach more so than anybody else. But we make it quite clear through this presentation and through other presentations that we are not pro or anti-gun ownership. We are just about safe storage and having conversations with other parents so that our children are safe. So there has been pushback because of Second Amendment, and that has been brought up. And we are known as a nonpartisan organization. One of the other arms of Moms Demand Action is a legislative arm, and they work with gun sense candidates to help advocate to pass certain legislation. It just so happens sometimes it runs one way or another across political lines, but we support any candidate that wants gun sense legislation, not taking away any firearms from anybody, but legislation to help keep our children safe and to close some loopholes that potentially can harm our children or have already been shown to harm our children. So yes, Second Amendment comes up on a regular basis, but we remind people that we are not anti or pro gun ownership.
We never use the word control. And I think that makes a big difference. And that's what I find myself correcting people a lot about. It's about gun safety. The word control, I think, scares everybody. But we say gun safety, and somehow that does seem to be a place we can all agree about. And it seems to be more palatable to everybody.
Just one comment on that. Can you hear me? Actually, I had seen a presentation on Missouri related to its recent changes, a few years ago, of relieving any sort of requirements, even licensing for teens. The increase in violence was exponential. It's tragic, and I'm a grandmother. My grandchildren, one goes to school in New York City. I'm terrified that with the concealed weapon. I mean, she feels like she's invincible, but we do have conversations. And as a grandmother, I'm okay. I have the relationship with my daughter that I can say, you know, how come she's coming that way? She's just like you, Chrissy, you know, one of those things. So, but it's scary. It's really frightening.
I appreciate what the presentation you put on. I think is something that's very important. The question I had, and this is a thought that I've always had, when I was younger, it was optional to take a gun safety course actually at school. And I feel actually just like we have sex education, having firearm education in school to not teach them about guns, but teach them about guns, but teach them the safety, and then also try and take away a little bit of that curiosity, but you know, it's never going to go away. What are your thoughts on something like that? Do you think that's something that would be useful, or do you think it would actually make the situation worse?
Well, first of all, I do wish it was required that people had to take gun safety classes, people who own guns, and very few people. That's what we need. That's part of the modeling part, is that our friend Scott does periodically go to the range and he practices, even though he's owned a gun for 30 years, you know, but not everybody does that. And that is an important piece. I am reluctant to say the schools should teach that. Very reluctant. As also a retired teacher, 33 years, I'm very comfortable teaching gun safety and teaching about safe storage and just asking the questions. I'm not sure how I feel about teaching them about guns or how to shoot in public school. I don't like it. I just can't explain it. You're the first person to ask me that question.
But you know, but that's a great question, because, but we have to always so remember that times are very, very different now than when we were growing up and when we were in school. And I think that the culture in schools is very different, and the accessibility to guns illegally is very different now. And I think that we have to look at where we are in society today before we make that kind of a judgment, a call.
And actually, maybe I explained wrong. It was a fire safety course, a firearm safety course.
I remember that.
We didn't actually do any shooting or anything else like that. They just educated us about guns, about being safe with guns and everything. It wasn't actually, there was no fire range or anything else like that. It was just a class on firearm safety.
I think also because different households feel differently, it really, the onus is on the parents of children to do that kind of a thing. And that's why that when we have parents attending these sessions, they can then turn around and go home and teach this to their children, because adults legally and personally are responsible for their children until they're adults.
I would feel more comfortable with making sure that every gun owner has to take that class than instructing children. And I agree with Sharon. I'm also a retired teacher. So my daughter was young enough that she had her first encounter, and thank God it's been the only encounter with a gun, before Columbine. And she came home. I knew the people across the street from us. One was a retired cop, and the other, his son was a cop. And the sons showed her a gun. And I wasn't in the house at the time. And I came home and we talked about it. She never went there I allowed her only to go in the pool with them when I was there after that. And then Columbine happened. And then I started asking people if they had guns in their homes. And luckily, most of the people she was friendly with, actually everybody she was friendly with, did not have an issue with it. So, but it is scary. It's scary. Yeah, they're children. And they're curious. That's part of what we said. They're curious, you know.
Sarah Beth put something in the chat, and I'd like to address that if it's at all possible.
Sure.
She said, statistically, Missouri has among the weakest gun laws in the country. Conversely, it has the 4th highest rate of gun deaths per 100,000 people. If you go to the website that Sharon referenced earlier, there's a graphic of strength of gun laws and number of gun deaths within each state of the United States. And the states with the stricter, and I don't mean stricter no ownership, I mean stricter gun laws of people who own guns, the gun death rate is significantly lower. Oh, who did that?
Oh, that works too.
That's it.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a
Thank
good
you,
one.
Sarah Beth, was that you? Thank you. Yeah, that's Everytown Research. We have, Everytown is our umbrella organization, and they do a tremendous amount of research on a regular basis, updated, and there, Sharon, just put the Everystat as well. A ton of research is done on a regular basis to update our statistics regularly, and whatever information we get that we share with you comes from Everytown, because it is the most up-to-date information that we can have. And you can see state by state the different levels of gun violence and different strength of laws in each state. Thank you, Sarah Beth.
Yeah. Sharon, thanks so much for the presentation. Thank you for everything. I mean, I think it's the best I can do is just thank you. Very, very interesting, very provocative. And the first thing I'm going to ask Jill to do is to send me those documents. So once again, thank you. And I think we'd all like to give you a big round.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Be safe.
Be smart.
Be smart and be safe.
Right.
Thanks. Are we ready? I have some notes from the connection basket. I've never had one of these before, so I'm not exactly sure what to do. Yeah, let's do those. One says here, vote. That's all it says. I don't know who wrote that one, but we might imagine. Another one is maybe Jill could send the PDFs in the next newsletter. And the book club is reading a funny and relevant book for its November 30th meeting. The name is It's All Relative. Jill has copies with her today, and all are welcome.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Tell me about the book club.
Oh, we have a book club.
Separate from these meetings?
Yeah, some kids, if somebody remember, but I'm not a.
Yeah, it's on the last Wednesday evening of the month here. I'll talk to you in a minute.
Okay.
We have all kinds of fun stuff that we do. My granddaughter Dominique is running the New York City Marathon today.
Oh.
How come every time? My first thought is, are they safe? Is that just tragic? It's her fourth. In my opinion, it's the hardest part. The hardest part would be waking up in the middle of the night to get to the starting point. So anyway, that was offered here to the group. The New York Marathon is today. And here's a blank one. Probably went with this one. From Angie Malik. My eyes are watering up here. It's weird. I have no idea why. I took a brave step for me by making an appointment with my doctor to try to address health concerns that I have. And I left that appointment with referrals for 5 other doctors. I'm so pissed. Joking aside, I'm just going to read these, by the way. Joking aside, this is all really hard for me and I'm struggling. I'm hoping that by sharing how hard this is, I might actually be able to make those appointments. Take all the good vibes and even prayers that I can get. This is what's so good about the Ethical Society. Could you imagine sharing something like this or sharing some of the other things that we do here? So if anybody has any advice, any prayers, anything that they might offer for Angie, either see her or just do it, and hopefully we'll all come out with a good ending to this. So thank you so much for that. Next Sunday, our own member, Steve Werner. Oh, I read this. This sounds really fascinating. We'll be leading our program live from the screen. He'll be sharing a short documentary created called Daniel Lord, The Restless Flame, Thinking Big in a Broken World. We will have time to discuss the film and ask Steve about its production. This is when I'm supposed to read the connection basket, but I'm okay. And now I'm supposed to leave you a quote or a joke. I had my best joke last time, so I won't. I'll give you a quote by, this is fascinating, it's always my brain, from Bruce Springsteen, of all people. He said, when I die, I don't want to go to heaven because I won't do heaven's work well. I pray that the devil will take me and put me to work in the fiery furnaces of hell. But now you can have a little bit more of insight of where my brain goes. Thanks for today. Thanks for everything. Thanks for coming here. And for visitors, please come back. This is an important part of my life, and maybe it could be an important part of your life as well. Thanks so much. Thanks.
Often school. Stuff right there, yeah. The country school. City school.